Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan, and this is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, the Israel-Iran conflict has sent oil prices soaring, while attacks on energy facilities threaten to disrupt both nations' production. Could the geopolitical standoff push prices even higher and spark an energy crisis? Rising oil prices could fuel inflation worldwide. The cost of living crisis risks getting worse if trade routes are disrupted. So how will Middle East tension affect the global economy? And the costs are mounting for both sides. Iran's economy is reeling after years of economic sanctions, while the war on Gaza has strained Israel's economy. Can the two nations afford an all-out war? As the Israel-Iran conflict escalates, every missile launched could reverberate through the global economy. At risk is 20% of the world's oil, which flows through the Strait of Hormuz that lies between Oman and Iran. Vital trade routes, the shipping industry, and the travel and tourism sectors face serious threats too. Oil prices have already soared to more than $76 a barrel as of June 19th. Now, if that rise continues, it could soon be felt at the gas pump, pushing up the cost of living all over the world. Iran's economy is reeling under Western sanctions, but as Israel presses to choke it even further, and with its war on Gaza continuing, its own economy is under extreme stress too. And if the conflict widens, the stakes for the two nations and the global economy will be even higher. Katia Lopez-Hodayan reports.
Conflict often makes investors nervous. Since Israel's attacks on Iran, the oil and gas sector in both countries have been disrupted. The concern is global. Major oil and energy facilities have been hit in both Iran and Israel, causing significant damage. As one of the world's major oil producers, Iran exports around 2 million barrels of crude oil a day. If fighting escalates and pours across the region, supplies could drop and prices soar worldwide.
As you know, when volatility hits, the price of oil and gas fluctuates, and I think it's early to say what's going to happen.
Much of the focus is on the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran has threatened to close in the past. The narrow waterway is between Iran and Oman in the Gulf. Up to 19 million barrels of crude oil and fuel pass through every day. That's nearly a fifth of the world's consumption. Iran says it will not negotiate while under attack.
It's very hard to see the Iranians wanting to negotiate under these circumstances. When they're at their weakest and when they feel least protected, they're probably going to lay low and pursue actions that are covert rather than try to make major compromises.
U.S. President Donald Trump has promised voters he'd lower inflation and petrol prices. A hike in the price of oil and energy could backfire with his base, especially with Washington backing Israel. Days before Israel attacked Iran, he expressed frustration with the U.S. Secretary of Energy.
I don't like the oil prices have gone up just a little bit over the last few days. I was going to call it just really start screaming at you. Are we okay? Nothing wrong, right? It's going to keep going down a little bit, right?
Wars are expensive, and there's questions on whether Israel can afford an extended conflict. A report estimates it's spending more than $700 million a day fighting Iran, and its war spending in Gaza is expected to reach more than $67 billion. Israel's travel and airline industries are also feeling the hit. Many airlines have suspended flights to and from Israel since it launched its attacks. Its flag carrier, El Al Airlines, has moved some of its planes out of the country. And in Iran, a country with a population of 90 million, families who've been dealing with Western sanctions for years are now bracing for the possibility of further hardship.
We're staying. Where would we go? Evacuate Tehran? How could we do that? Some people might have a lot of savings. Maybe they can leave. But us personally, I don't think we're going anywhere.
The conflict could have global economic consequences, particularly on energy markets. Banks and economists warn that will widely depend on the extent of the escalation. Katia Lopez-Hodayan, Al Jazeera, for Counting the Cost.
Let's take a closer look at why energy exports from the Middle East are so critical. Iran has the world's second largest gas reserves and the third largest crude oil reserves. Its economy is widely driven by this revenue. China is its top client. India, South Korea, Japan, Italy, and Greece are also customers. Israeli strikes have hit some Iranian energy facilities. Among the most significant is a strike on the world's largest natural gas field, South Pars. Israeli facilities have also been hit. An oil refinery in the city of Haifa shut down all its operations following a strike, and Israel decided to shut down 2 of its 3 offshore natural gas fields, which could affect its exports to Egypt and Jordan. The conflict is making Gulf states nervous. Further strikes could destabilize not only the region, but also the exports of top energy producers like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. Let's bring in our panel of guests. Joining us from Paris, Neil Atkinson, an independent energy analyst and visiting fellow at the National Centre for Energy Analytics. He's also the former head of the Oil Industry and Markets Division at the International Energy Agency. From London, joining us is Ahmed Kaya, a principal economist at the National Institute for Economic and Social Research. And in Doha is Ahmed Halal, the MENA director at Global Counsel. That's a strategic advisory firm. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Neil, let's start with you. We are having this conversation on June 19th. By the time that anyone watches this programme, anything might have happened. Oil supplies haven't yet been affected, so why have prices risen?
Well, because people are worried that oil supplies might be affected, and there's very good reason to have that fear. Prices, obviously, as you say, are elevated, but you could argue that it's a miracle that the prices haven't shot up even more. But because so far, physical interruptions to normal supplies have been very limited. There is some evidence that shippers are perhaps more reluctant to enter the Gulf than they were before. There's evidence that shipping costs are beginning to rise as insurance rises based on fears of the attacks. But so far, the supplies have not actually been significantly interrupted. And that is the key to the whole thing as far as rising prices, the threats to the global economy that you've been describing. As long as that doesn't happen, then the worst economic devastation will be avoided.
So this spike could be just that, just a spike. And if nothing happens to disrupt supplies, then prices could stabilize again.
Well, there's no reason, if supplies are maintained at close to normal levels, there is no reason for oil prices to spike to dangerously high levels. And this is the key to the whole thing. So far, it has not happened. But of course, as you said a moment ago, by the time people see this program, anything could have happened, perhaps. We've seen an attack on an abandoned Iranian nuclear facility at Arak, for example. So there is the danger of some degree of escalation. But whether it will affect the Strait of Hormuz, which is the key to all the economic devastation which you presaged, that is so far has not happened. And I personally don't think it will.
Ahmed, in London, as we said, this conversation happening on the 19th of June, anything might happen. But so far, what has been the economic impact of what's happened globally?
So the impact of the Middle East tensions to the global economy mainly runs through the 3 main channels. So first of all, it's the uncertainty channel. So even before these events, we have seen a huge uncertainty shock in the global economy, mainly because of trade tariffs, as well as high public debt and higher borrowing costs. And apparently these tensions also add already fragile global economic environment and keeps uncertainties higher. So what happens if uncertainties are high? So businesses delay their investment decisions, consumers delay their spending decisions, and jointly these affect the global economy. And the second channel that is important in the context of Middle East tensions is higher energy prices. So we have seen that oil prices rose by approximately 10% and natural gas prices rose by approximately 7%. And we did some model-based analysis on the impact of these on the global inflation. And what we have seen was the current increase in oil and natural gas prices translates into global inflation as 0.2 to 0.4 percentage points. So this is apparently not that high, And we should also discount this inflationary effect with previous fall in oil prices. As we know, oil prices already dropped by approximately 10% since the introduction of tariffs. And this is more like a rebound rather than a new additional shock. And finally, as you mentioned, shipping costs has been increasing as well. But when we look at the longer term picture of the shipping costs were already quite high last year. So maybe that there has been some increase in shipping costs compared to last week, but they remained relatively stable compared to last year.
Okay, Ahmed,
Therefore, we think that
a brief answer, if you can, please, because I want to bring Ahmed in Doha. But if this conflict continues, when or where will the likes of you and I begin to feel it economically?
Well, apparently, I mean, so far the impact has been pretty low for the global economy. Apparently, there are some regional effects which are pretty strong, actually. But for the global level, the impact will depend on how the Middle East tensions will escalate going forward. So oil price rise from $60 per barrel to $70 per barrel may not push prices up significantly. But if, for instance, Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, then the oil prices can go up to maybe $90 per barrel, $100 per barrel. Then the inflationary impact will be quite high. And when it comes to timing, apparently there will be some delays of businesses passing through the increased costs in final consumer prices. And according to our analysis, and this takes between 6 months to a year.
Okay. Ahmed, in Doha, Israel's war since October 2023 estimated to have cost, what, around $85 billion. That was before it started to bomb Iran. Can Israel afford to be taking the kind of military action that it is right now?
Well, the short answer is yes. They do have the financial reserves and the financial buffers. Is Israel bleeding? Of course it is. It's been raising a lot of debt. It's on a war footing. It's an economy on a war footing. Its defense expenditure has gone from 4% pre-October 7th to about 8% now. Its debt levels, debt to GDP ratio has gone up by about 8% from around 60 to 68%. And reservists are being called up. So the workforce, the tech workforce that contributes to taxes and to growth and to innovation in the economy has been taken to the front line. So it has taken a hit, but it's not an economy in crisis. It can withstand it. It is insulated because it's a diversified, dynamic, tech-driven economy.
What about Iran, though, Ahmed? I mean, its economy is in a very, very different state, isn't it? Reeling as it is under years of Western sanctions.
Iran is much worse off. It has, as you said, been under sanctions for decades. Inflation is running at 40%. The Iranian rial is in free fall. And a lot of Iranians are living in poverty. About a third of the population is living in extreme poverty. And this is only going to exacerbate things. And the Israeli strikes are intending to worsen the economic crisis. They are targeting economic infrastructure, energy infrastructure, as your introduction showed. And that's obviously a signal that they are after more than just the nuclear facilities in Iran, but also after regime change, because it's blackouts is how you start to fuel unrest within a population and start getting a population to be frustrated. We haven't seen the impact of that yet. The Iranian society still is rallying around the flag and seeing this as an external threat and not seeing it as an opportunity to topple the regime.
Neil, how important are Iranian energy supplies to the global economy? What would be the impact if those supplies were interrupted? As we say, it has the world's third largest oil reserves. It is selling some oil despite that Western sanctions. Who's buying it?
One word, China. Iran is subject to sanctions, as you indicated, and has been for a long time. During the Biden administration, it was widely believed that the US was adopting a blind eye approach to Iranian oil exports. And as part of an effort to keep oil prices under control, they were allowing Iranian oil exports to increase, which they did. And today, Iran's exporting about 1.6 million barrels a day of oil, give or take, most of which goes to China under contracts which are very advantageous to the Chinese. They get oil at a discount. So Iran's oil is significant, but if, for the sake of argument, Iran's oil exports were to dwindle to nothing because of the developing situation, such is the state of the current global oil market, that assuming the Strait of Hormuz remains open, there is plentiful spare capacity in other countries, notably Saudi Arabia and to some extent the UAE and Iraq and Kuwait, plus very, very high levels of oil stocks sitting on the ground or at sea around the world, that in fact a loss of Iranian oil would not be massively damaging to the global economy.
Ahmed, in London, I suppose the main fear as far as the global economy is concerned is inflation, which after rising after the COVID crisis, the cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine, looked as though it was finally being tamed. What would a rise in inflation mean, particularly for someone like President Trump?
Well, apparently it's not a good sign. I mean, as you said, inflation levels in most advanced economies have been coming down, and central banks started to reduce their interest rates. And both because of the tariff-related inflationary shocks, mainly in the United States, and also because of the global geopolitical tensions, particularly in the Middle East, there may be a possibility of another a renewed type of inflationary shock because of all these events. Apparently, these risks keep central banks a little bit more cautious when it comes to lowering interest rates.
So you don't think that the easing that we've seen in interest rates over the last few months is likely to continue right now?
Well, it's likely to continue, but as we saw from yesterday's Federal Reserve's decision, they are also quite cautious. We were, in the beginning of the year, we were expecting at least 3 cuts from the Federal Reserve. But because of all these inflationary pressures, possible inflationary pressures that I mentioned, they also reduced their, and all global economists have reduced their expectation of Fed rate cuts. Currently, both FOMC members and also independent analysts expect about 1 or 2 cuts in the rest of this year.
Ahmed, if credit rating agencies take the view that Israel's military escalation is a reason to lower further Israel's credit rating, how much could that affect its ability to borrow? How much strain could that add to Israel's economy, despite the fact that you said that at the moment it's pretty robust?
It can still borrow from international markets, even with another downgrade. I mean, as recently as May, S&P reaffirmed its rating of Israel with a negative outlook, obviously because it's got a multi-front war on its hands. But even when Israel got its very first credit rating downgrade in February last year, the following month in March, it raised its biggest ever sovereign bond at 8 billion. It's a bumper debt sale, and it was a vote of confidence in the Israeli economy. So yes, a credit downgrade, another one, would cause interest rates to go up for them, borrowing costs to go up for them. But Israel, unlike Iran, which is barred from international financial markets, Israel can access those markets and will find many institutional investors to buy its debt. Okay,
and what about Iran's people in particular? I know you said at the moment there seems to be a rallying around the government and that people are generally against Israel. What about when their already parlous economic situation gets worse?
So I think they've been building for decades now what's called a resistance economy or a fortress economy, more self-reliance and secret channels or illicit channels to evade sanction. It's a very sophisticated system, and they've been sending most of their oil, as my colleague on the panel was saying, to China, to these privately owned, they're called teapot refineries in China, and that's how Iran gets its oil revenue. So I don't see if the war takes a month or two, that the cause of collapse of the regime will be over the economic circumstances. I think the Iranian people's ability to persist and to swallow pain in this period shouldn't be underestimated.
Neil, as we said, we're having this discussion on June 19th. Anything could happen by the time that anyone sees this program. Can you foresee any situation in which you think that Iran would disrupt supplies through the Straits of Hormuz or close the strait?
I find that very, very difficult to envisage because it would be an act of economic suicide. As I said a moment ago, Iran is supplying more than 1 million barrels a day of oil to China. China is Iran's biggest oil customer, but it's also China is Iran's biggest overall trade partner. So it would be a desperate attempt to do so. And can I point out that over many decades, at times of international tension around the Gulf, we've all got out our maps of the Strait of Hormuz and looked at it. And the conclusion most analysts draw is that, in fact, it would be very, very difficult to block the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is not the sole owner of the waters going through the strait. Oman also has territorial waters, as you said earlier on, and it is such an important passageway for global trade that it is very difficult to see that it would be allowed. And for Iran, it would be economic suicide.
All right, Nate. Okay, so let's suppose the Strait of Hormuz remains open. What about if other oil and gas producers in the region are somehow drawn into the conflict?
Well, if by some escalation, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, were all of them or some combination of those countries drawn into the conflict and their ability to move their energy as normal through the Strait of Hormuz was hampered, then yes, all bets are off. You're looking at a major disruption to global trade flows, and that would be reflected in significantly higher prices until such a time as the smoke were to clear, so to speak, and we could adjust to whatever new paradigm existed. But again, I repeat that over 40 years of looking at this, the prospects of the strait being blocked are very, very limited. It could perhaps happen if there was a rogue commander or there was a misunderstood communication from inside Tehran to forces that are in the region. Accidents can always happen, but I find it very hard to believe it would be a deliberate act of policy to block off the strait. And the Americans, for sure, would be absolutely opposed to that because the inflationary effects that would ripple through in time eventually ripple through to the prices at the pump in the United States. And that is massively important to President Trump.
Ahmed, let's talk more about the risks to global trade and shipping routes. What is this conflict as of June 19th? What impact is it going to have on freight and insurance costs? Are those costs, if they rise, going to be passed on to you, me, and anyone watching, consumers?
We've already seen that shipping costs have risen, even though slightly, but both insurance costs and also freight costs have increased because of the conflicts, especially for the ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. We have done another analysis on the impact of higher shipping costs on inflation, and what we have seen so far is 10% increase in shipping costs feeds into 0.5% higher inflation in OECD countries. So apparently this is a huge inflationary shock. But as I mentioned before, so far we haven't seen a persistent increase in shipping costs. So maybe, I'm going to reiterate, maybe there are some regional inflationary effects and also effects on the economic activity, but global impact so far has been pretty limited.
Ahmed, we've talked about the impact on both Israel's and Iran's economies. What about their neighbors in the region, countries like Egypt, Jordan, Iraq? What impact is this conflict going to have on their economies and people?
There will be knock-on effects on the more vulnerable, the more fiscally constrained countries like Egypt and Jordan. Israel, for its part, has its domestic needs met from its own gas fields. It has shut off or reduced production in Leviathan and Karish, which traditionally exported gas to Egypt and Jordan, and is being served domestically by Tamar. As for Egypt and Jordan, they are much more vulnerable. Egypt gets around 15% of its gas imports from Egypt, and Jordan generates 40% of electricity from gas imported from Israel. And those are two countries with economies in crisis. Egypt is not out of the woods. It had a steep devaluation last year, has had a bailout from the international financial community, including the IMF, and needs to keep reforming its economy. This will add to its energy import bill. It went over the last 12 months from being a net energy or gas exporter to a net energy importer because of problems with its own fields. And so the gas from Israel was absolutely a lifeline for its energy security. And it's going to cost Egypt around $1 billion a month to get gas from other sources, from the spot market, and to then start talking to countries like Qatar about long-term supply contracts. Same goes for Jordan. Low foreign investment, weaker economy, really dependent on foreign aid, which has been slowed down from traditional partners like the US, and already a very flammable situation in Jordan with the situation in Gaza, causing political pressures that will be now compounded by economic pressures. So difficult time for both countries.
Neil, last question to you. Of course, we're a lot of us looking on, seeing the frightening headlines and analysis that we do every day. A lot of people around the world are extremely worried about the possibility of this conflict escalating and the impact that it will have on us all. Do you see any reason right now for optimism?
Not really, no, because I think Israel has decided to go all in. It started something which is big and could have enormous consequences for the stability of Iran, which is its biggest enemy. And I think Israel is going to push on, and we are going to have to watch how the fallout comes. And yes, it's entirely reasonable for people to feel worried and anxious as to what the fallout might be, because as we said earlier on, if there is a spillover into global trade of energy through the Strait of Hormuz or elsewhere, then that will have a direct impact on people all around the world if inflationary pressures were to reassert themselves very strongly. So, it's a very, very dangerous time.
Gentlemen, there we will have to leave it. Many thanks indeed for being with us today. Neil Atkinson, Ahmed Kaya, and Ahmed Halal. And that's our show for this week. Now, if you'd like to comment on anything that you've just heard in our discussion, I'm at A Finnegan on X. Use the hashtag AJCTC when you do comment, please. Or you could drop us a line. Countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our email address. There's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC, of course. That takes you straight to our page, and there you'll find individual reports, links, and entire editions for you to catch up on. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.